Hi there, for anybody chiming in, just give me about 3 more minutes and I'll get started. I want to get started right at 7 o'clock because that's the time that I set to do the live stream. So we'll get started right at 7. And for those of you who are just now chiming in, I will get started in just a few moments. It is just about 7 o'clock. Let me go ahead and share my own post, but also I'll ask that for those of you who are on the live today, that you would also share the post so that other people can benefit from hearing the discussion and chiming into the discussion. I'd love for the discussion today and for future discussions to be interactive. So if you have a question or you'd like to chime in and talk about the topic today, that would be wonderful. I'd love to just kind of talk about these things with you guys. I've got to silence this phone, but I need to be able to see when you do have questions, and also let me know that you're on here, because unless you are my friend on Facebook and not just liking the page, I have no way of knowing that you're on here. So if you see me saying hello to people and I'm not saying your name, it probably has a lot to do with the fact that I don't know you're on here. So I see that there are a few people on, and let me go ahead and, first of all, let me turn on some light in here. Hold on. That actually made absolutely no difference whatsoever, but it's okay. It's not so dark, but I just like a little bit more light when I'm trying to do a live. Anyway, today I want to talk a little bit about one of my 3 top platform issues, and I see a couple of people have joined us and are saying hello. Hi there, Amy and Courtney and Melanie and Sarah. I hope you guys are doing well today. So today I want to talk about one of my top 3 platform issues that were derived from what people in the district said they wanted to see. The top 3 are healthcare, education, and economic development. So today I want to talk a little bit about economic development. which somebody raised a question relative to my platform and last week that kind of led us into the economic development discussion. So that's why I'm discussing that topic today. A lot of people want to know, what are you referring to as you talk about economic development and job creation? Well, let me start by saying this. One of the issues that I've seen recently coming out of this current administration is a whole lot of discussion on ending some of the social services and some of the benefits that people rely on for their livelihood. Oftentimes, these are people who are working full time and still making less than poverty wages. And so my fundamental belief system is that nobody who works full time in this country should have to be homeless or suffering and struggling to the extent that they can't afford to live anywhere, they can't afford the basic necessities, food, and you know, just food and shelter. Those are things that any working person should have a reasonable expectation that they should have access to in such a developed country as ours. I think a lot of times what we are seeing is greed, and that greed is what prevents all of us from being able to benefit by this particular economy. So what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is that when you have a corporation that is paying minimum wage or paying very, very low wages, and they're not paying livable wages, and we don't have policy that will dictate what a livable wage should be that is consistent with what it really costs to live, you end up with people who are working full time and living in their cars, or working full time and living in a shelter. Well, there are programs in this country right now that are under attack that are directly related to people who work full time and are living in poverty, such as childcare, and things like Section 8 housing. And if you've been paying attention to what's been going on within the legislature, what they're looking to do is to increase the percentage that poor people who are living in subsidized housing have to pay for their housing. They want to reduce the amount of food stamps that people get who are working full time. And keep in mind, in Ohio, it is already a requirement that you work at least, I believe it's 32 hours a week to get any benefits in Ohio. And that's for most people who are able-bodied in Ohio. A lot of people don't know that, and so they buy into the rhetoric that people are living free on welfare and that they're not holding their weight. And so I want to dispel that myth, and it's easy to dispel that myth. All you have to do in order to dispel the myth is to simply go to the Department of Job and Family Services and look up the requirements for receiving those benefits. If you don't want to do that, pick up the telephone and call and ask the question, what is the requirement to be able to get welfare benefits in whatever county you're in Ohio? And they're going to tell you what I'm telling you now. There is a work requirement already in this country, or I'm sorry, in this state. And so people have been deceived in believing that people are still living free on this welfare system and that they're freeloaders and all of that kind of stuff. In fact, the person who currently sits in the seat that I'm running for, called veterans, freeloaders, and moochers who rely on some of the services that the VA and that our U.S. government has made available to those veterans. And oftentimes, these veterans are individuals who have suffered one way or another because of their service. But even outside of that, we have a lot of veterans who are living, who are making poverty wages, or who are just struggling to survive. And so, you know, I personally am very, very frustrated when I hear that kind of a thing with regard to our veterans. I believe that our veterans should be respected, and that, you know, these are people who oftentimes are putting their lives on the line for our safety and our security as a nation. And I just think that they deserve the highest honor. And I am not remiss in knowing and understanding that the person who currently sits in the congressional seat I'm running for is also a veteran. And I've heard many individuals who have served who believe that the reason he's able to make those kinds of assertions is because of his privilege, even in the military. And so I won't get into all of that. Maybe we'll have some veterans on who can talk a little bit about their feelings on that. But I've had conversations across the district. But what is important, I believe, when we begin to talk about cutting services that people rely on for basic living expenses, is that we also invest in economic development and job creation. I think it's inhumane to talk about cutting benefits and cutting services if we're not talking about developing our human resources. And so there are, when you talk about economic development is really making an investment in one of the factors of production. The factors of production include land, labor, knowledge, capital, and entrepreneurship. So those are the 5 factors of production. So anytime you begin to talk about cutting services, along with that discussion, you should also be talking about how are we going to empower people and make sure that people have the resources that they need to exist. I'm also of the mindset that most people want to be able to cover their expenses and to pay their bills. And, you know, maybe there's a few people out there who, you know, who don't fit that description. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the majority of Americans who want to be able to feed their families, have a roof over their heads, and to take care of their basic necessities. We ought to be talking about how are we going to empower those people, right along with any discussion about cutting benefits. As it relates to economic development and job creation, all 5 of those factors of production require investment. So we talk about entrepreneurship. We're talking about business ownership, ensuring that people have the resources that they need, the capital that they need to invest in opportunities to create their own jobs. As a small business person and as a consultant, I can tell you that loans to small businesses is not easy to come by. And one of the major challenges that we have when you start talking about creating jobs and ensuring that people are able to make a living is that businesses or business owners tend to have difficulty accessing resources in order to both invest in their business as well as growing their business. And it's even more difficult, the smaller you are, it's even more difficult to get those resources. So we want to make sure that our small businesses have the access to resources to build those businesses. 85% of all working people in this country work for a small business. So we're not talking about, some small number of folks that are going to be impacted by investing in businesses, small businesses. 85% of this country, and maybe that's fluctuated a little bit. It's gone up or it's gone down, but right around 85%. And I'm glad that Charmaine said buying locally. And Charmaine, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I'll mention this as well, because I've had a couple of people up in the northern counties of the 8th District. And the 8th District includes Butler County in Ohio, Clark, Darke, Mercer, Miami, and Preble counties. Those are the counties that the 8th District encompasses, where I am running for U.S. Congress. I had a few people up in the northern counties, up in Miami County, where our current legislator is from, pull me aside and tell me, I work for this man, and he actually has businesses in China, and he's investing in China, and I've gotten all sorts of conversation about business practices that he has, and I would absolutely love to have some of those folks come on here. So if you're listening and you've pulled me aside, and I don't know, maybe we can do this anonymously, because I'm assuming that some of those folks, even though he's saying that he is no longer associated with those businesses, on the website I see that he is actually still associated in one way or another. So those people may not feel comfortable coming on, but maybe we can do something whereby we're able to have a conversation and involve them in the conversation in one way or another, so that we don't impact their livelihood. However, buying locally is one way we can empower people in the district and make sure that it is the businesses that are here that are prospering, and we're not investing in foreign countries, which, for a long time in this country, jobs were being outsourced. I had a job I was employed by General Electric, and I might have mentioned this the last time I spoke, and I was among one of the first in this country to experience outsourcing to India. And I know a lot of us have had that experience. And when we talk about ensuring the viability and the fortitude of this country, and we talk about economic development, we have to make an investment in our human resources. That means that we have to invest in training programs, we have to invest in vocational programs, and we have to invest in higher education. Right now, there are several bills that have been introduced to make it more difficult for people to get a higher education. In fact, some of those programs that people rely on to pay for their education after they're finished, you've got a young college graduate just coming out of school and needing a way to ensure that they're able to become stabilized and that they can cover the cost of their education bills. There are programs right now that enable those individuals to be able to pay according to their income, or to put off paying those debts until they become stabilized in a job. Forbearance programs or other kinds of programs that enable people to be able to work and to have an opportunity to build themselves. I'm just going to take a call real quick. This might be somebody. Let me just check. Hello. Okay. So I went ahead and took that call just in case it was somebody who is trying to get through to ask questions. They were calling in via Facebook. And, I don't mind receiving calls that way when I'm on the live. Ordinarily, I wouldn't answer those calls. But if you do have questions, you can go ahead and type your question into the comment section, and I'll try to respond to those questions as they come up. And hey there, Sue, how are you today? And so I mentioned the 5 factors of production that are factors of production that help build our GDP, or our gross domestic product. What that means is that as a nation, the way we measure the growth of our economy is through GDP, our gross domestic product. It is, are we producing more goods and services? And so the way that we as a nation produce more goods and services is through investment in our labor force. And so investment in our labor force means that we are investing in education and training for our labor force. We are investing in our labor force when we increase the amount of pay that individuals are receiving on their 9-to-5 jobs. And there are a number of ways that you can increase the income of an individual. You can do that through just a direct pay increase. You can do that through a tax cut. Unfortunately, the tax cut that was passed in this country towards the end of last year, I actually like to call that a tax scam, because that tax cut is not a permanent tax cut for most working people. That particular tax cut is going to go away in just 7 years from now. There will be no tax cut for most of us Americans. The only people who will benefit from that tax cut in about 7 years from now will be the wealthiest 1% of Americans. So that tax cut was not designed in order to empower most of us, most working folks. And so yes, I call it a tax scam. And we can't be deceived by those kinds of shenanigans. We have to be informed, and we have to continue to press for those kinds of things that are going to empower us as a community. Things like investing in our people, things like making capital available to individuals who want to invest, either business owners who are already in business, making capital available to them so that they can build their businesses. And when we talk about investing in our people, one of the factors of production, and they say there are 4 factors of production, some say that there are 5, entrepreneurship and knowledge are the 2 that people, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and knowledge is some of the ones that are added to the factors of production. And of course, you can see how tying in investing in people, investing in entrepreneurship and knowledge are all correlated. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. The other thing we want to make sure we're doing is investing in jobs of the future. This current administration has made investments in coal, for example. The problem with investing in coal is I believe we cannot look back on the glory days when we were once a coal producing nation and that's what we were known for and great for. Because the problem you have is that the rest of the world is moving away from coal. The rest of the world is moving towards clean energy, which protects our environment, and it is also better for, it's more advanced in terms of our systems that have already been designed and developed, like our cars and the way we fuel our homes and that kind of thing. We have to invest in renewable sources of energy, renewable energy sources. The rest of the world is doing it. There's no reason we should not. We should not be the nation that's coming from behind on this one. And unfortunately, this administration has turned back the clock on many things, and renewable energy is one of them. I was listening to a broadcast just last night where our current congressperson, he spoke to a group of young people. And one of the things he was boasting about is cutting regulations. I think he said that they've cut like 23 or 33, I believe it was 33 regulations. And he was boasting on that. Keep in mind, when he talks about cutting regulations, we're talking about air, water, and those kinds of regulations that are designed to protect us as consumers, as individuals. Those are all put in place to ensure our safety. Can you imagine? And this is a real life scenario. One of the things that he voted for is dumping coal waste into our waterways. That scares me. Because if you think about Flint, Michigan, for example, and from my understanding, even though there's rhetoric out there, the people in Flint, Michigan are still suffering with bad water. We've seen other states, I believe West Virginia was also struggling and suffering, and their water was in the news a lot. So we're talking about our health. And if you look at the cancer statistics, and I posted this on my page quite a while ago, the cancer statistics across our district are very high, especially up near Clark County. And I had a conversation with somebody up there who talked about just how many people they know who has cancer. And I began to tell them about the statistics, and I'll post that again on my page so that you can go and look at them for yourself. You don't have to rely on anything that I'm saying. But we in this particular region, and if you look at the map of where cancer is prevalent, you'll see a lot of cancers right here in the Midwest. Now, I'm not a medical doctor. My doctorate degree is in public policy. However, when I see stuff like that, it makes me wonder whether we're dealing with something that is environmental. And so when we start talking about passing regulation or rescinding regulation that's already been passed that protect our environment, that is a tremendous concern for me, and it should be a concern for you as well. As a business person, I understand the difficulty and the challenges for businesses to have to comply with some of the regulations. I don't think the answer is to do away with all of the regulations. I think the answer is to ensure that businesses are making responsible decisions that are protecting us as consumers, protecting our environment. As citizens of this country, I think we have the right to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And so I'm not of the mindset that we should be okay with the idea of turning back regulations that were put in place to protect us. And I just want to read a comment or two here. Someone says fossil fuels are only for fossil politicians. Careful though, clean energy isn't always clean and is sometimes exploits other countries. Cobalt mines, I have other examples. And feel free to include those kinds of things in here, your examples. We can talk about those things. Heidi says, I have asthma. I worry about our air quality. It's life or death for me. I also have asthma. And in addition to asthma, I have a terrible case of allergies. And I'll tell you, I know for sure that's environmental. When I lived over in Africa, I didn't suffer with allergies. But as soon as I moved back to the States, I definitely had a reemergence of allergies. So I know that is definitely environmental. Brian said regulations are needed to protect the environment, workers, and consumers. But hey, the 1% might lose a small percentage of profits. And you're absolutely right. We're not talking about driving businesses into poverty by having regulations in place that protect consumers. Most of these corporations do have very high profit margins. They're not struggling. Melanie says she absolutely 100% agrees. Amy says this administration has done nothing but attack our quality of life by way of environment, deregulation, healthcare benefits for marginalized individuals and vets. And then Brian says, agree completely, Amy. And I also agree. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that because even one of the things that also concerns me, being that I am running for office in the 8th district and have always been somebody who is concerned about the environment and concerned about our food. I believe that we should be investing in farmers here locally. I think that we should not be entrusting our food to overseas producers. And I'm not somebody who believes that we should not trade. I believe in free and open trade. I also believe that we should be protecting our farmers here at home. We should be protecting our interest here at home. One of the things that concerns me about the Farm Bill, which is designed to take away benefits to the working poor, is that the Farm Bill also negatively impacts our farmers and their ability to produce. Now, my personal belief is that some of these large corporate farms are taking over the farm industry. That concerns me because when you begin to talk about large corporations, oftentimes they are looking to mass produce our food, and we're not necessarily getting food at that point. There are fish I'd never heard of growing up as a child, and then all of a sudden we've got these new species of fish in the grocery store, which I personally will not touch because I'm scared to death of where these fish came from. And if you do some research on some of these species of fish, they have been mass produced in other countries, and some of these countries, and I remember this documentary that was done a number of years ago. It was oh goodness gracious, I can't think of the name of the documentary. I will put it inside of the comments later, but the documentary talked about how our food, the food we eat, was being grown overseas and in carcinogenic water. That means cancerous water, and the people in those countries are not allowed to drink the water, but our food is being grown in that water. Well, that really, really scares me, to the extent that there are fish that I will not touch in the grocery store because of where it's raised, because of where it comes from. And some of the stores that produce these fish at a cheaper cost enable these businesses to make money. They enable them to be mass produced, but I don't believe that they're healthy for us. So that is a concern for me. Brian says that the person I'm running against is a Trump and Freedom Caucus lackey, profits over workers, the environment, and wages. And Charmaine says yes. So I think that what's important here and what we should walk away thinking about and talking about is, number one, investing in our people, investing in jobs of the future. We cannot continue to look back on the glory days of coal. The problem with this is that we are in a race for our future. If we fall behind in this particular point in our future, if we fall behind in terms of technology and production of goods and services, we may never see the America that we grew up with, the America we grew up in. We cannot, as a nation, afford to fall behind. In fact, if you follow economics at all, you'll know that China, for quite a while, and maybe even now, I have to go back and look at those numbers, their GDP was higher than ours for a couple of years. They had a GDP that was running higher than ours. That's a concern, and it should be a concern for all of us, because if we're not producing jobs for the future and of the future, and if we're not producing a labor force who is skilled and educated to have those jobs and produce those jobs, then we are in trouble as a nation, and we absolutely will fall behind. We'll find ourselves falling behind. And we cannot let that happen. We have the power to ensure that we are continuing to progress as a nation. I think that what we're seeing right now is a Congress who is greedy and looking to empower those people who put them in office to the detriment of the rest of us. If you don't believe me, look at the fact that the prison industrial complex funded many of the individuals who currently sit on Congress. And those individuals ensured that once that prison industrial complex funded them to put them in office, they ensured that contracts, large contracts, were given out to those individuals to the tune of $110 million through the Department of Justice almost as soon as they got in office. So, look it up for yourself. This is stuff that's all available to the public and in the public domain. We have to be concerned about the rest of us. The 1% has representation in Congress. We need representation the same way the 1% has representation. I am running to represent you. I'm not interested in going to Congress to represent myself. I say that all the time, and I'll continue to say it. My objective is to ensure that you have an advocate in Washington, D.C., who understands the challenges of regular, ordinary people like most of us, 99% of us in this district. Susie says, yes, support small family farms. We absolutely have to. I think about 2 months ago, a merger of two huge mega food producers was authorized. I believe, and I don't hear a lot of farmers talking about it. I have heard some, but I believe that the objective in allowing those companies to come together, being that it was profit driven, will be to the detriment of all of us, because we rely on our food producers to ensure that we have healthy food. And local farmers, there is a market just up the road here in Hamilton. In fact, there's fresh food markets all over the place, and I encourage you to utilize those fresh food markets, because you are supporting local family farms. And we are moving as a nation towards more healthy food choices. And while we're moving as a nation towards more healthy food choices, understand that those companies that produce less healthy foods are losing when we make healthy choices. And so they are not motivated to ensure that our food is healthy, grown here at home, and that our farmers are benefiting from our desire to eat healthier. Charmaine says, Lucy and Jean at Boulder Belt. Yes, providing clean, locally grown produce. Thank you. Let's see what other comments we have here. Let's get the word out that our votes are essential. And you're absolutely right. I just talked to somebody in Springfield this weekend, and I talked to her for about 15 minutes. And it saddened me when she said, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count. And I told her, you're wrong. Your vote does count. Each and every single solitary vote that's cast in this congressional race counts. In the local races counts. And her frustration was with the Electoral College. Well, the Electoral College does not impact your congressional vote or your other local votes. So please don't be of the mindset, don't get in the mindset that your vote is not going to count. Your vote absolutely will count. And while we're talking about that, please make sure that you check your registration. We just had a massive voter purge here in Ohio, and many of our friends and neighbors and family members were impacted by that. So I would urge you to contact 5 people who you know are of voting age and ask them to check their voter registration to make sure they're still registered. In fact, if they did not vote in the last general election or in the last presidential election, encourage them to re-register. Also, if you know a young person who turns 18 before November 6th, they can vote in this election. If they're 17 years old, have them go ahead and register to vote. And when you tell them to register to vote, encourage them to vote for me, because I am looking, and that's Dr. Vanessa Enoch. Encourage them to vote for Doc Enoch, because I am looking to go to Washington to protect their interests. Some of the things that young people care about, like the internet, they rely on the internet for everything, for watching movies, for Snapchat, and so all kinds of social media, Twitter. A lot of these kids are going to school online, or they're doing research online for their classes. And at the same time, our greedy legislators are trying to get rid of open access to the internet. This is a way of life for us. We check we pay our bills online. We're communicating online. We're online right now, listening to why it's important to ensure that we develop our economy and that we develop our people resources. Without open access to the internet, somebody else is going to control what you can see and what you have access to. And you'll have to pay more money to be able to access the same things that you're able to freely access right now. So please be aware of that. Let's see. And Amy, you're absolutely right. I am here to represent us, to represent this district. And not just represent this district. I'm here to represent the 99% of us across this country. When I go to Congress, my vote in Congress will impact the entire country. It won't just impact people in Ohio, but it is the responsibility of people in Ohio to ensure that I go to Congress. It will be the people in the 8th District of Ohio to vote for me, to send me to Washington, D.C. So you have a huge responsibility, but your responsibility, it's easy to fulfill your responsibility. All you have to do is make sure you're registered and then go to the polls and vote on November 6th. You can vote before November 6th. I believe that early voting starts on November 10th. Get to the polls and early vote. And let's see. Somebody asked another question. Let me see if I can get to the other questions here. Charmaine and Martin want to volunteer to help get the word out. Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Susie. Susie is our volunteer coordinator, and we would love to have you. If you're not on the line right now, if you're not watching live right now, I will make sure that we put a link to our volunteer sign up. We need boots on the ground across this district. We are running a people-powered campaign. That means we are not receiving big corporate dollars. We're not receiving corporate PAC monies. They're not, dark monies aren't pouring into this district to fund this race, at least not into this campaign. They are flowing into the guy that I'm running against, his campaign. Most of his money comes from outside of this district. You all have funded this campaign, and I appreciate that. And you can actually make donations to the campaign at enochforcongress.com and click on donations and make a donation to this campaign. Any amount helps. So don't think you have a donation that's too small. The donations that I have appreciated the most have been the ones where I know that people are giving from their whatever resources they have, whatever limited resources they have. And there are people giving larger donations, and I'm also very touched by that, because what you're saying when you give larger donations is that I am making an investment in me, and I believe that if I send you to Washington, that you're going to go there and protect my interests. That's what I have an interest in doing, and I hope that you will make an investment in me, but even moreover, that you'll make an investment in our district and make an investment in the 99%, because that's who I'm running for. Let's see here. Brian says, why else is Russia trying to hack it? Why are corporations trying to buy it? Why is the GOP trying to suppress it? Those are all questions I think we definitely want to raise. How do people make sure their voter registration is still active and wasn't purged? There is a link on our page. I believe it's still out there. Get registered. If not, again, I will make sure that that link is in this feed, so that, in fact, it's difficult to put it in the feed because a lot of people won't go back to the feed, or you'll have to sort through it. So I'll check to see if it's on the web page. If not, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and access information on Am I Registered? At the Secretary of State of Ohio, you can see whether you are registered or not. Just type in, look up my voter registration, Ohio, in Google, and you should be able to find it. Brian says, flip the 8th, blue wave. Absolutely. Martin says, go to webpage of your county's election board. That's how it works in Butler County. Absolutely. Melanie says she will volunteer. Susie, make sure you get Melanie's information. Brian says, will you introduce a bill or vote to protect Special Counsel Mueller? I think that the fact that our voting process has been interfered with, and nobody's saying it has not. Everybody is saying, yes, it has been interfered with. I think we need to allow Mueller to finish his investigation. And there have been so many indictments already. You can't indict someone unless there is some kind of evidence out there that something has occurred. And so I hope that he will be able to finish his investigation. And certainly, if I am in office, I will definitely ensure that we are ascertaining whether that process was fair to everybody, and to protect the individuals who are making sure that the process continues to be fair, that he's investigating what happened there. I think it's urgent that we look into that process and know what happened. We have a new election coming up in November. There are individuals who are advocating for paper ballots. I believe that Bill Clinton just made a public appeal for people to vote with paper ballots. And let me say this, as somebody who has worked for the Board of Elections for elections, you can request a paper ballot anytime. Even now, you can walk in and request a paper ballot. If you're voting early, you can send your early voting ballot in, and you're voting on a paper ballot. So I encourage you to vote early. If you are absentee ballot, not early voting. Early voting's on the machines in most counties, but if you are voting absentee, you can vote on a paper ballot. Any other questions of me? I only meant to do this for 30 minutes, but you all had some wonderful questions, and I definitely wanted to entertain those questions. Let me say this. I am running in the 6-county district of Ohio that includes Mercer, Miami, Preble, Butler, Clark, and Darke counties. If you live in one of those 6 Ohio counties, then I am running in the district where you will have the power to elect me to U.S. Congress. And I'm asking you to elect me, but I'm also asking you to continue to share your opinions, continue to go to my webpage. There is a share your opinion area of that webpage. I told you, I derived my platform from what you told me you wanted to see. We continue to monitor those to see if there's different things in the narrative that people are talking about that they want to see. We surveyed the district to find out, what do people want? What do people need? We will continue to do that. But you can go to the webpage at enochforcongress.com and, let us know, share your opinion, contact the campaign. You can volunteer on that webpage. You can donate on that webpage, and just contact us in general. And let me do this as well, so that my director of communications, Becca, will be happy with me that I announce some of our upcoming events. I know Becca is watching and tweeting from afar. We have another we have a meet and greet after the parade. We will be marching in the parade in Mercer County on July 28th. And right after that parade, there is going to be a meet and greet at Casa Rodriguez. So come to Casa Rodriguez, and you can sign up to volunteer there. You can meet me. You can talk to me about what it is that you want to see. We also have a meet and greet coming up on August 6th in Troy, Ohio. August 6th will be at the Hainer Cultural Center in Troy, up in Miami County. We have a healthcare town hall that is happening at Butler Tech in Hamilton, Ohio on August 15th. And I'll try to remind you all when we do these discussions what events we have coming up. On August 30th, we have a healthcare town hall in Piqua, Ohio. So that's August 30th. And those are some of the events coming up. I know we are still in the process of planning some other events. We've got some fundraisers coming up, and I'll remember to announce those fundraisers so that if you have an interest in meeting me face to face, or coming out and talking to me and making a donation to the campaign and networking with other people in your area, that is a wonderful time to do that. But the next event coming up is the meet and greet after the parade in Mercer County in Salina, or Salina, I don't know how y'all pronounce that, but that's on Saturday, July 28th. And let me see, I see a couple more comments on here. Thank you so much, Kurt. Kurt says I have his vote. Let's see. I do want to talk more about clean energy sometime. Cleanly sourced materials are essential. And I do have, I have received some things from folks about clean energy. It is a hot topic in this district, so I do want to continue to lend my attention to that. I've been someone who is concerned about the air and water in our environment since I was young. Your Facebook page is awesome. I love seeing the events posted and shared. Thank you for hosting events and being so available, unlike your opponent. No problem, Brian. That is absolutely who I am as a person. But also, again, my objective is to represent you, and I can't represent you if I'm not listening to you. And I think that sometimes that folks don't quite get that we vote them in office and send them to Washington, D.C. to represent us. And when they don't go and represent the voices of the people in the district, you have the power to change that. You have the power to elect people to office who are going to go to Washington, D.C. and to be your voice in Congress. That's why we're hosting events. That's why we're listening. That's why we're talking. And we're not just talking and not listening. I'm hearing you, and I'm talking about the things that you say concern you. So if you're not talking to me, then I don't know what actually concerns you. So please come out to those events and share. Bring friends with you when you come to those events. Hope you will have town halls after you are elected. Absolutely. We decided to go ahead and start having town halls now so that ahead of me being elected, we know what we're going to do in Washington. But once elected, I won't know what your challenges are if I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm not hosting town halls, or I'm not listening to you and ensuring that there are forums where you can communicate with me, that's how I know that the person who is currently in this seat in Washington, D.C. right now is not listening to us, because we are not having those town halls. In fact, somebody reached out to me and said that they contacted our congressperson, and he told her that people aren't interested in having a healthcare town hall. This person was calling because she was interested in having the healthcare town hall. So I think that what we want to do is to ensure that we empower our neighbors, our friends, and our relatives to get out to vote on Election Day in November. So I can't say that enough. And I also can't say enough about how, if you have issues or you have concerns that you want to make sure that we address in the legislature, once you send me there, then I will make sure that I am maintaining that information, and that I am taking that information to DC so that I can represent you and not myself, not my friends. I don't have friends sitting around, wealthy friends sitting around waiting on me to go to DC to award them contracts. I have gotten plenty of people who have shown me relationships and, you know, various networks that the person I'm running against are tied into, and ensuring that certain folks have contracts and resources. I'm not talking about those because I have not verified that information. But what I am saying to you is I don't have those kinds of connections. I don't have anybody who I am looking to try and empower, or self-interest motives in mind. When I go to DC, I'm going to DC to represent you. And Brian says he has meetings with his rich buddies and calls it a town hall, or has GOP controlled forums with softball questions. Melanie says I never get a response to any correspondence I send to this individual, not even a form letter. So she has reached out to the congressperson in this district and has not even gotten a form letter. Now, I do know of people who have gotten form letters back, and I've also seen some very extensive, long letters that basically say, I am supporting the status quo, and I'm sure that that's not what people in the district want to hear. You want to know that your congressperson has your best interest at heart. So that's why I'm running. Well, we have been on here nearly an hour, and like I said, I was only going to be on here for 30 minutes, and I definitely have a lot of work to do in order to ensure that I am accessible, and I am reaching out to constituents in the district to ensure that this November, that people in this district know who I am. If you have an interest in helping with that process and volunteering, please do go to my webpage, enochforcongress.com, sign up to volunteer, send a donation, however small or however large you feel so inclined to give. I definitely, and our campaign team, appreciate your donation. This is not my campaign, this is your campaign. And if I don't get elected in November, you didn't win this November. So we want to make sure that you win, and the only way that I win is if you win, and vice versa. So thank you so much for chiming in. Please do share the live so that people who were not on here have the opportunity to view it and to learn more about what I mean when I say economic development and job creation. And if you have something that you want to see us talk about on these lives, feel free to reach out to me and to raise your questions. And we will talk about whatever issues are on your minds, or whatever issues we see in the news that need to be addressed. Those are the things that we will look forward to talking about in future lives. So thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. Bye-bye.